The wine poured before he could finish insulting her, cascading red across the lap of Busan's most dangerous man. No Jin-Q looked down at the stain spreading across his designer pants. His bodyguards reached for their guns. Phones rose everywhere. Rose knew her life just ended. But instead of rage, he smiled. Slow. Hungry. Deadly. Finally, he whispered. Someone with fire. That smile changed everything. Before we dive into this absolutely explosive story, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button for Ebony and Pearl stories right now. It takes 2 seconds, and you'll never miss these jaw-dropping stories that'll have you up at 2 a.m. yelling at your screen. Don't be that person who watches for free and ghosts us. We see you. Show some love and smash that button. Now, let's get back to the chaos. The wine didn't spill by accident. It poured with purpose, a dark red flood cascading across the lap of the most dangerous man in Houndy. The bottle tipped forward, and Bordeaux splashed across No Jin-Q's designer pants, soaking into expensive fabric, dripping onto the velvet booth, staining the intricate tattoos visible through his half-unbuttoned black shirt. Crystal chandeliers froze mid-glitter. Silverware halted. Conversations died. Every guest, every waiter, every breathing soul in the sapphire room held their breath as Rose Woodman stood tall, bottle still tilted, eyes locked on the tattooed king whose name made grown men tremble. But Jin-Q didn't explode. Didn't stand. Didn't reach for the knife everyone knew he carried. He just looked down at the wine spreading across his clothes, then slowly, dangerously, lifted his eyes to hers. And smiled. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Hungry. Finally, he whispered, voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Someone with fire. Phones rose like witnesses at an execution. Recording started. Flashes blinked. And Rose's life shattered into a million viral pieces. Rose's hand didn't tremble from the act itself. It trembled from 12 years of swallowing disrespect. 12 years of being invisible while serving the visible. 12 years of watching entitled men speak to her like she was furniture with a pulse, and saying nothing. Until tonight. The wine bottle had felt like a grenade in her hand. And she'd finally pulled the pin. 15 minutes earlier, everything had been normal. The sapphire room gleamed like a jewel box. Marble floors polished to mirrors, white orchids arranged in crystal vases, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Houndy Beach like a postcard of impossible wealth. Rose entered through the staff doors with a tray of polished wine glasses, her feet aching from a double shift, her mind already calculating tips, rent, next semester's tuition payment. She was 26, exhausted, and invisible. Just another face in the machine. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, the woman who'd raised her in a tiny kitchen in Savannah, Georgia, teaching her that hard work and dignity went hand in hand. Baby girl, you work hard, you keep your head high, and the world will make space for you. Rose had believed that once. She'd moved to Korea chasing opportunity, chasing culinary school, chasing the dream of opening her own restaurant someday. But after 2 years of grueling shifts and condescending customers, she'd learned the world didn't make space for people like her. It made them smaller. The sapphire room was elite dining at its finest. Velvet booths, chandeliers dripping crystal, a dress code stricter than most countries' borders. The kind of place where a single bottle of wine cost more than Rose's monthly rent. She moved through the restaurant like a ghost, refilling glasses, clearing plates, absorbing insults in 3 languages. Exhausted. Composed. Invisible. Until the front doors opened. And the temperature dropped. 3 black sedans pulled up outside. Rose noticed because everyone noticed. Conversations dropped to whispers. Managers straightened ties. Security stiffened near the exits. Then he walked in. No Jin-Q. The name alone made experienced servers flinch. He moved through the sapphire room like he owned the oxygen. And technically, rumor said he owned half the businesses in Houndy, legal and otherwise. Tailored black suit. Chest tattoos crawling up his neck like smoke. Sharp jaw. Sharper eyes that swept the room with the bored assessment of a predator in a petting zoo. His entourage followed, bodyguards with scarred knuckles, suited men with expressions carved from stone, assistants in designer who looked like they'd seen things that would break normal people. They claimed the entire VIP section. And Rose was assigned to serve them. She should have known then. Should have felt the storm building. Rose approached with the Bordeaux he'd ordered, professional smile fixed in place, tray balanced perfectly despite her screaming feet. Jin-Q didn't glance at her. Just flicked his fingers dismissively at his men and said in Korean, assuming she wouldn't understand. She's new. Hands too soft. Americans always think they can serve in places like this. Laughter rippled through his crew. Low, knowing, cruel. One of them leaned closer, smirking at Rose like she was a curiosity in a zoo. Pretty though. Pet pretty. More laughter. Rose's grip on the bottle tightened. Her jaw locked. Jean Q still didn't look at her, like she wasn't worth the effort of acknowledging. That's enough, Rose said quietly, her Georgia accent cutting through their amusement. Now his eyes lifted. Cold. Sharp. Calculating. You warn me? He asked softly, leaning back against the velvet booth. Little waitress? He smiled. Testing, cruel, dripping with contempt. Maybe you don't understand how things work here. People like you. Rose tipped the bottle. Red wine poured like judgment, splashing across his lap, soaking into his pants, staining the intricate dragons inked across his chest. The restaurant exploded in gasps. Chairs scraped. His men lunged, one reaching for a gun tucked in his jacket, another grabbing for Rose's wrist, another already pulling out his phone. But Jean Q raised one hand. A single gesture. They froze like statues. He stared at the wine spreading across his clothes, then lifted his gaze to Rose's face with an expression she couldn't read. She expected fury. Violence. The end of everything. Instead, that smile. Slow. Dangerous. Consuming. Finally, he murmured, eyes locked on hers like she'd just become the only thing in the room that mattered. Someone with fire. The moment stretched. Phones captured every angle. Flashes lit up the darkness gathering in his eyes. The manager rushed over, face pale with terror. Mr. No, I am so. Jean Q silenced him with a look. He stood slowly, wine dripping from his clothes, and pulled out a thick envelope from his jacket. Dropped it on the table. For the cleanup, he said calmly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Then he pointed at Rose. And for her shift. She's done. Rose's adrenaline spiked. I didn't ask you to. I didn't say it was a favor. He turned to leave, his entourage falling into formation like a military unit. Then he stopped, looked back over his shoulder. His eyes found hers across the chaos. You, he said softly, but every person in that restaurant heard him. I'll see again. Not a question. Not a threat. A certainty. He walked out, leaving Rose standing there, trembling, as the restaurant erupted into whispers, shocked faces, and dozens of phones recording her destruction. The video would hit the internet in 7 minutes. Her life would explode in 10. And in a penthouse across the city, no Jean Q would watch the recording 27 times before sunrise, studying the exact moment a waitress refused to bow. If you can't stand people like Jean Q who treat service workers like they're beneath them, hit subscribe right now. Comment what time you're watching this. I want to know if you're team morning, afternoon, or late night story binge. Only people who think disrespect is acceptable won't subscribe. Don't be that person. Rose didn't wait to be escorted out. She ripped off her apron, threw it on the nearest table, and walked through the sapphire room with her head high, even as every eye in the restaurant tracked her like she was a grenade with a pin pulled. The manager chased after her, his voice shrill with panic. Rose. Miss Woodman. You can't just. She spun on him in the marble lobby, fury still burning in her chest. I quit. You don't have to quit, we can discuss. I quit. She pushed through the glass doors into Houndy's neon-soaked night, the humid air hitting her like a wall. Her hands shook. Her heart hammered. Behind her, through the windows, she could see phones still raised, recording, immortalizing the moment she'd thrown away everything she'd worked for. Grandmother would be so disappointed. The thought hit harder than anything Jean Q could have said. The bus ride home was 43 minutes of hell. Rose collapsed into a seat near the back, her phone clutched in trembling hands. The first notification popped up as the bus pulled away from the curb. Then another. And another. Her screen glitched under the weight of incoming alerts. Texts, emails, social media mentions flooding in faster than her phone could process. She opened Twitter with shaking fingers. Hashtag Winegate was trending. Worldwide. Hashtag Who Is She sat at number 2. Hashtag Houndy Mafia climbed to number 5. The video was everywhere. Dozens of angles. Slowed down. Zoomed in. Remixed with dramatic music and commentary in 7 languages. 2.4 million views. 5.1 million views. 8.7 million views. The numbers climbed like a slot machine spinning out of control. Rose scrolled through the comments, her stomach twisting into knots. Finally someone put these arrogant men in their place, clapping hands, clapping hands, clapping hands. She just signed her death warrant. Rip. Did you see how he smiled? Man is obsessed, loudly crying face. Black excellence standing up to elitism. This is what we need. She's getting deported 100%. Assault is assault. Anyone else notice he didn't get angry? He looked interested? Eyes. Rose's vision blurred. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. What had she done? She'd just humiliated a man who owned half of Houndy's underworld. A man whose reputation was built on violence and power. A man who didn't forgive. The bus rumbled through the city, indifferent to her unraveling panic. Rose's apartment in Gwangan was barely bigger than a closet. 300 square feet of organized chaos perched on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better decades. She stumbled inside, dropped her bag, and collapsed against the door. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 16 missed calls. 243 text messages. 999 plus notifications. She turned it off and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears that threatened to break through. I just ruined my life over a bottle of wine. A pounding on her door made her jump. Rose, open up. She recognized the voice. Hannah, her co-worker and the closest thing she had to a friend in Korea. Rose opened the door to find Hannah standing there with wild eyes and a bag of convenience store soju. Are you insane? Hannah pushed past her into the tiny apartment, speaking rapid English mixed with Korean. Do you have any idea what you just did? I know exactly what I did. Rose's voice came out hollow. Hannah dropped the soju on the counter and grabbed Rose's shoulders. No, I don't think you do. That was No Jin Q. The No Jin Q. I know who he is. Then you know he doesn't forgive public disrespect. Ever. Hannah's face was pale with genuine fear. He's unpredictable, Rose. One day he donates millions to children's hospitals. The next day someone who crossed him disappears. You're viral right now. Millions of people saw you humiliate him. Rose sank onto her futon, the weight of it all crashing down. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. Hannah sat beside her, voice softening. But you need to be careful. Very careful. Across the city, in a penthouse that cost more than most people earned in 10 lifetimes, No Jin Q sat alone in the dark. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Busan's glittering coastline, a kingdom of neon and shadows that answered to him. He'd sent everyone away. No bodyguards. No assistants. No witnesses to what he was about to do. He opened his laptop and pressed play. The video started again. The 10th time tonight. Maybe the 20th. He'd stopped counting. There she was, Rose Woodman in her server's uniform, exhaustion carved into her posture, fury blazing in her dark eyes as she stepped forward. The pour itself was almost secondary to what came after. That moment when she stood her ground, trembling but defiant, and refused to apologize. That's enough, she'd warned, voice low and deadly. Jin Q paused the video, freezing her face mid-defiance. He touched the screen, fingers tracing the curve of her jaw, the fire in her expression. He should be furious. Should be calling his lawyers, orchestrating her destruction, making an example that would echo through every restaurant in Houndy. Instead, he felt alive. For the first time in years, someone had treated him like a man who could be wrong. Not an asset to manage. Not a reputation to protect. Just a man who'd been cruel and deserved consequences. A memory surfaced. Unbidden. Jin Q at 7 years old, hiding under a restaurant table while gunfire shattered the windows. His mother, a server just like Rose, had shoved him beneath the white tablecloth and whispered urgently, "Stay quiet. Don't move. No matter what." Then she'd run back into the chaos, pulling other customers to safety while rival gang members tore through the dining room. She'd saved 6 people that night. And died doing it. The rival gang had owned the protection racket. His father's organization had tried to muscle in. The restaurant became a battlefield. And his mother became collateral damage. Jin Q had made 2 vows under that table. Never be powerless again. Never let anyone make him feel anything. Until tonight. Until a waitress with fire in her eyes had shattered 13 years of emotional armor with a single bottle of wine. Jin Q closed the laptop slowly. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out over his city. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Yes, sir." His head of security answered on the first ring. Jin Q's voice was quiet. "Absolute. Find her address." "Sir." "The waitress." Rose Woodman. I want to know where she lives, where she works, who her friends are. Everything. A pause. Right away, sir. Jean Q ended the call. Below his penthouse, 3 black sedans rolled out of the underground garage, their headlights cutting through Busan's midnight streets like predators hunting prey. He touched his chest where wine had stained his shirt, where her defiance had burned through his carefully constructed walls. And for the first time in 13 years, no Jean Q smiled like he meant it. The pounding on Rose's door came at 1:47 a.m. She jolted awake, heart hammering, disoriented in the darkness of her tiny apartment. The knocking came again. Sharp, authoritative, the kind that didn't ask permission. Rose stumbled to the door, checking the peephole with shaking hands. 3 men in black suits stood in her narrow hallway, faces carved from stone, postures screaming security detail. Her blood turned to ice. Miss Woodman. The voice came through the door, polite but immovable. Please open the door. I'm calling the police. That won't be necessary. Then the men stepped aside. And no Jean Q appeared. Hands in his pockets. Black shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Hair slightly mussed like he'd run his fingers through it. Expression relaxed, almost bored, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, dangerous. He looked directly at the peephole. Smiled. Hello, Rose. She should have kept the door closed. Should have called the police, her embassy, anyone. Instead, something reckless and furious made her unlock the deadbolt and yank the door open. How did you find my address? Jean Q's smile widened. I own half this city. Did you really think you could pour wine on me and disappear? He stepped forward. Rose didn't move, blocking the doorway with her body. You're not coming in. I'm not here to hurt you. He tilted his head, studying her like she was a fascinating puzzle. If I wanted that, you'd already be gone. The casual way he said it, like violence was just another Tuesday, made her stomach twist. But she held her ground. Jean Q glanced past her into the shoebox apartment, taking in the futon, the makeshift kitchen, the single window overlooking flickering streetlights. Then he simply walked past her, into her home, without asking. Hey! Rose spun around, fury overriding fear. I didn't invite you in. I know. He stood in the center of her tiny living space, hands still in his pockets, looking completely at ease. But we need to talk. His bodyguards remained in the hallway, silent sentinels. Rose slammed the door and crossed her arms. Talk fast, then get out. Jean Q pulled at his shirt collar, drawing her attention to the faint wine stain still visible on the expensive fabric. This shirt, he said quietly, cost more than your month's rent. Rose's jaw tightened. And you deserved it. Silence stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, his expression shifted. Not anger. Something closer to amusement. Most people apologize when they cost me money. I'm not most people. No. He stepped closer, and Rose fought the urge to back away. You're not. He circled her small apartment slowly, taking in the culinary school textbooks stacked on the floor, the recipe cards pinned to her wall, the collection of mismatched dishes she'd been slowly accumulating. You're going to culinary school, he observed. Was. Past tense. Thanks to you, I'm probably blacklisted from every restaurant in Houndy. Actually, Jean Q turned to face her, that's why I'm here. I'm offering you a job. Rose barked out a laugh. You've got to be kidding. I own an establishment called the Red Orchid. Private club. Very exclusive. His eyes never left hers. I need someone to serve my VIP guests. A casino, Rose said flatly. You want me to work at your illegal casino. I prefer the term, members-only establishment. I prefer the term, absolutely not. Jean Q tilted his head, genuinely curious. Why not? Because I don't work for criminals. The words hung in the air like a grenade. His bodyguards would have heard through the door. Any normal person would have been terrified of the consequences. But Rose was exhausted, furious, and done backing down. Jean Q stared at her. Then he did something completely unexpected. He laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full, genuine, delighted laugh that transformed his entire face. Outside in the hallway, his bodyguards exchanged panicked glances. No one said no to no Jean Q. No one called him a criminal to his face. No one laughed at his offers. But Rose just stood there, arms crossed, chin lifted, waiting for him to finish. When his laughter finally subsided,
He wiped his eyes and looked at her with something that might have been respect. You're serious. Dead serious.
You'd rather be unemployed and blacklisted than work for me?
Yes.
Another beat of silence. Then Jean Q stepped closer, close enough that Rose could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Rose Woodman, he said softly, you're the most interesting person I've met in 13 years. That's not a compliment from someone like you. His smile turned sharp. Dangerous. It's the highest compliment I give. He moved toward the door, his bodyguard straightening as he approached. Rose thought it was over. Then he paused, hand on the doorknob, and looked back. This wasn't a request, he said quietly. It was an inevitability. You will consider it.
I won't.
Yes. His eyes held hers with absolute certainty.
You will.
He opened the door. And Rose? You should know. My rivals saw that video too. The White Serpents have been looking for leverage against me for months. You just became very interesting to very dangerous people. The implication hit like ice water. So if you won't work for me, Jean Q continued, voice soft as silk and sharp as glass, at least be careful. The world you stepped into tonight doesn't forgive mistakes. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, his entourage following like shadows. Rose locked the door with trembling hands, pressed her back against it, tried to breathe. Across the street, hidden in the darkness of a closed storefront, a man lowered his camera. The White Serpent tattoo on his neck gleamed under the streetlight as he typed a message on his encrypted phone. Found her. Guangin District. 4th floor. Alone. Unprotected. He attached 3 photos of Rose's building. The response came within seconds. Watch her. Don't move yet. She's more valuable if Jean Q cares about her. Let's see how much. The man smiled. Cold. Predatory. And settled in to wait. Above him, Rose's lights finally went dark. Unaware that the danger stalking her had nothing to do with the man who'd just left. And everything to do with the war she'd accidentally walked into. If you can't stand people who think they can control others just because they have power, hit that subscribe button for Ebony and Pearl stories right now. Comment, she should stay strong, if you think Rose deserves to make her own choices without being threatened. Only people who think intimidation is acceptable won't engage. Don't be that person. Rose returned to the Sapphire Room exactly 1 week later. Not because she wanted to, the manager had called 3 times, practically begging. They were understaffed, overwhelmed, and despite the viral incident, business had tripled. Apparently, people loved dining where drama happened. Rose needed the money. Her savings were bleeding out, and culinary school tuition didn't pause for personal crises. So she swallowed her pride, put on her uniform, and walked back into the restaurant that had witnessed her destruction. The evening shift started normally. Wealthy guests. Expensive wine. Whispered conversations. Rose moved through the dining room like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, ignoring the phones that occasionally rose to capture her. Then, at 9:47 p.m., the front windows exploded. Gunfire shattered the crystalline silence. Glass rained down like deadly snow. Screaming erupted, guests diving under tables, servers dropping trays, chaos consuming the elegant space in seconds. Men in black masks stormed through the shattered entrance, weapons raised, shouting in Korean. Rose's training kicked in before her fear could. She grabbed a woman frozen in shock and pulled her behind the bar. Shielded a child with her body. Dragged an elderly man away from the line of fire. Stay down, she shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. Don't move. More gunfire. The chandelier above them shook, crystals tinkling like wind chimes in a hurricane. One of the masked men pointed his weapon at the cowering guests. Barking orders Rose couldn't fully process through the adrenaline roaring in her ears. Then she saw the tattoo on his neck as his mask slipped. A white serpent. Her blood turned to ice. Jean Q's rivals. This is because of me. The second wave of violence arrived like a storm. More gunfire, but this time from outside. The White Serpent spun toward the entrance as black sedans screeched to a halt outside the destroyed windows. Then No Jean Q walked through the shattered glass like an avenging angel dressed in black. His men flanked him, weapons drawn, faces carved from stone and fury. Jean Q's eyes swept the chaos, cataloging every detail, until they landed on Rose crouched behind the bar. Something shifted in his expression. Something volcanic. Get out, he said quietly to the White Serpents, his voice deadlier than any shout. Before I paint these walls with you. One of the masked men laughed. We're not here for you, Jean Q. We're here for... Jean Q moved.
Faster than Rose thought possible. He closed the distance and fired. Not at the man, but at the window behind him, sending a cascade of glass that forced the serpents back.
I said get out. His men advanced, a coordinated unit of controlled violence. The white serpents retreated, firing covering shots as they fled through the back exit. Then Jean Q crossed the restaurant in long strides, grabbed Rose's wrist, and pulled her behind him like she weighed nothing. Stay close, he commanded. Rose's heart hammered. I can. Stay. Close. The police arrived 6 minutes later. By then, the white serpents had vanished like smoke, and Jean Q's men had positioned themselves as concerned citizens who'd been dining nearby. The manager was hysterical. Guests were traumatized. The restaurant looked like a war zone. And Rose stood in the middle of it all, shaking but unbroken. Jean Q watched her from across the room as she gave her statement to the police. Watched how she kept her voice steady, how she checked on the guests she'd protected, how she refused to fall apart. When the police finally cleared the scene, he found her on the rooftop. The rain had started, light, misty, turning Houndy's neon lights into watercolor smudges against the night sky. Rose stood at the edge of the rooftop, arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the city that had become so dangerous. She heard him approach but didn't turn. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jean Q stopped beside her, close enough that she felt his presence like heat. Doing what? Protecting me. Coming to my apartment. Showing up here. She finally turned to face him, exhaustion and fury warring in her expression. Why do you care? Silence stretched between them. Rain collected in his dark hair, ran down his sharp cheekbones. Then he stepped closer. Because you poured wine on me without fear, he said softly. Because you looked at me like I was human. Like I could bleed like any man. You can. No one's treated me that way since my mother died. Rose's breath caught. Jean Q's jaw tightened, his eyes distant with memory. She was killed in a restaurant attack when I was 7. Rival gang warfare. She was just a server, wrong place, wrong time, collateral damage in someone else's war. His voice dropped to barely audible. I was hiding under a table. She pushed me there before she ran back to save other people. I watched her die trying to be brave. He met Rose's eyes. I vowed that day to never be powerless again. To never let anyone close enough to hurt me. Until a waitress threw wine in my face and reminded me what courage actually looks like. The space between them felt electric. Jean Q lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, featherlight, reverent. Tell me you felt nothing when you poured that wine, he murmured, his breath warm against her lips. Tell me I'm imagining this. Rose's heart thundered in her chest. She should step back. Should run. Should do anything except stand here letting a dangerous man touch her like she was something precious. Instead, she whispered, I felt everything I wasn't supposed to. Jean Q's eyes darkened with something that looked like relief and hunger combined. He leaned in, closing the distance between them, his lips hovering just above hers. A gunshot cracked through the night. Distant but distinct. They broke apart. The moment shattered. Jean Q's entire body shifted into combat mode, his hand moving instinctively to the weapon concealed at his back. Get inside, he ordered, voice hard. But Rose grabbed his arm. Jean Q. He looked at her, and for just a second she saw it. The man beneath the armor, the boy who'd hidden under a restaurant table, the person who was tired of being alone. Then his mask slammed back into place. This isn't over, he said quietly. And she didn't know if he meant the attack. Or them. The threat started within hours. Rose's social media exploded with messages. Some from concerned strangers, most from accounts with white serpent imagery and promises of violence. You chose the wrong side, American. Jean Q can't protect you forever. Pretty face won't save you when we find you. Her phone buzzed constantly until she threw it across her apartment in frustration. The call from the Sapphire room came that afternoon. We're letting you go, the manager said, his voice tight with fear. For safety reasons. Yours and ours. Rose didn't fight it. She was fired. Blacklisted. Targeted by a gang. And somehow, impossibly, all she could think about was the almost kiss on that rain-soaked rooftop. Jean Q appeared at her door that evening with 2 suitcases and an expression that brokered no argument. You're moving. Rose blocked the doorway. Excuse me. To a secure location. Hotel. Top floor. My men will rotate security. Absolutely not. His jaw tightened. Rose, the White Serpents put a price on you. 20 million won to anyone who delivers you to their territory. You're not safe here. So your solution is to lock me up? My solution is to keep you alive. I won't be owned, Rose said fiercely, stepping forward until they were inches apart. Not by them. Not by you. Not by anyone. Jean Q stared at her, frustration and something deeper warring in his expression. Then stand beside me, he said quietly. The words hung between them like a bridge across dangerous water. What? You said you won't be owned. Fine. He stepped closer, his voice intense. Stand beside me. As an equal. Let me protect you not because I own you, but because he stopped, jaw clenching. Because I can't lose you. The argument that followed was volcanic. Rose paced her tiny apartment like a caged tiger. Your world is violence and blood and gangs. I came to Korea to build something, not destroy myself. You think I don't know that? Jean Q's voice rose for the first time, raw with emotion. You think I want this for you? But they made you a target the moment you defended yourself against me. So this is my fault? That's not what He dragged his hand through his hair, frustration radiating off him. Rose, I'm trying to keep you safe. By trapping me in a gilded cage. By giving you a choice. He grabbed her shoulders gently, forcing her to look at him. Stay in this world with me, or I'll get you out. New identity. New country. Whatever you need to be free of this. Rose's breath caught. You'd let me go? If it meant you'd be safe? His eyes held hers with devastating honesty. Yes. The confession shattered something between them. I don't want to go, she whispered. Then stay. I'm terrified of your world. I'm terrified of losing you. 3 days later, a rainstorm hit Busan like divine intervention. Rose stood on the hotel rooftop, the secure location Jean Q had insisted on, watching rain hammer the city into submission. She'd barely seen him since their argument. His men reported he was handling business. Dismantling something. Restructuring. She didn't know what it meant. Then the rooftop door slammed open. Jean Q stood there, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to his face, chest heaving like he'd run the entire way. I cut ties, he said without preamble. Rose's heart stopped. What? The violent operations. The protection rackets tied to civilian businesses. The partnerships with groups like the White Serpents. He walked toward her through the rain, water streaming down his face. I dismantled it. All of it. Jean Q. You changed me. His voice cracked with raw emotion. The night you poured that wine on me, you woke something up that I'd buried for 13 years. And I don't know how to undo it. I don't want to undo it. Rose's hand rose to her mouth, tears mixing with rain. He stopped in front of her, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. A life with me will never be completely safe, he said quietly. I can't promise you normal. I can't promise you easy. But I can promise you honest. And I can promise it's yours, if you want it. Rose reached up, touching his rain-slicked cheek with trembling fingers. I want it, she whispered. Then she pulled him down and kissed him. The kiss was everything the rooftop almost moment had promised and more. Intense. Electric. Inevitable. Jean Q's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Rose's fingers tangled in his wet hair, 13 years of his walls and 12 years of her silence burning away in the space between their lips. Rain pounded around them. Thunder rolled across the sky. And two people who'd been alone for far too long finally found home in each other. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Jean Q pressed his forehead to hers. I won't protect you, he murmured. I'll stand with you. Rose smiled, fierce and bright. I won't be kept behind you. I stand beside you. Equal footing. Equal footing, he agreed. 2 weeks later, Rose walked into the Red Orchid for the first time. Not as a server. As Jean Q's partner. The underground casino was elegant chaos. Velvet and gold, danger and luxury intertwined. His men lined the entrance, and as Rose passed, they bowed. Not mockingly. With genuine respect. Jean Q walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on her lower back, and leaned close to whisper. The night you poured that wine, you woke me up. Rose looked up at him, her smile sharp and certain. Good, she said. Stay awake.
The neon lights of the red orchid flickered overhead like sparks igniting their future. Dangerous, uncertain, but undeniably theirs.
Together.
If you believe love should be about standing together as equals, not one person owning the other, hit that subscribe button for Ebony and Pearl stories right now. Comment equal partnership if you think Rose made the right choice. Only people who think control and possession are romantic won't engage.
Don't be that person.
Show some love and let's keep this fire burning.